Okay, so here we are with another public relations quick tip. I'd hoped to do them earlier, but this is when I got them. So, one of the chapters we're looking at this week is communication. When you get done with your plan, obviously you're going to have to communicate to your various publics. And remember, there's all kinds of different kinds of publics involved, and those publics may utilize different communication channels. So you have to prepare your message to go across multiple types of channels. So there's a couple of things you need to know for sure when you're getting ready to communicate your message. Watch this. No, I knew it. Okay. So you need to know three things when you're ready to communicate your plan. The first one is what constitutes communication and how people receive messages. You need to know. This public primarily gets their information from where? If it's investor type people, then media like the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, websites that are focused on the stock market and finances. If it's new product introduction, then where does your particular public pull its information from? If it's IT, for example, are they looking at particular websites? Are they looking at particular channels on YouTube? Are they looking at magazines and newspapers? What specific kinds of channels do people utilize, and how do they receive? Through social media? Do they receive through television? Do they receive through the radio? Do they receive through email? There's all kinds of different ways to communicate. And the next thing you need to know is, how do people process information? And then how do you utilize that to change perceptions? Because a lot of PR is managing people's reactions. A lot of times you'll be putting an announcement out, for example, that this is one that came across recently in the real world. McDonald's, if I understand them correctly, has decided to put the McRib out one more time, and then it's on its bye-bye tour. They're never going to do it again. That people who are huge McRib fans are going to go nuts at the thought that there's never going to be another McRib. And that's going to make them, that potentially could make them mad at McDonald's, right? So you've got to think about, okay, how are people going to process this? Hey, we're not going to put the Big Mac out anymore. And how do we change their perception of being mad at McDonald's to being happy with McDonald's? And they've actually done a pretty good job with their ads that I've seen. They're being very nostalgic about it and talking about the things that have happened with the McRib and that kind of things. And it's something you would think would not be a big deal, but for McDonald's people, it's a big deal. For McDonald's public, some of their publics, it's a big deal. And so you have to think about, how do I shape perceptions? How do I change perceptions? What do I put specifically in here that will result in the outcome I'm seeking? And then which tools are most appropriate? If your publics are mostly elderly retired people, social media is probably not going to be the tool you would want to use. It might be the tool that you're most familiar with, but remember, your focus is on your public, not on yourself. So you've got to find out, okay, what does this public use? Maybe the elderly, more retired people, they still watch the news. So maybe you find ways to insert your message into news type of articles, and maybe you get, somebody from the company interviewed in an article about what's going on, in an unpaid sort of media release. You have to think about what's the best tools for reaching audience. If it's a younger audience, the internet is probably going to be the way to go. And then, okay, what does the internet comprise for younger people? Certain markets of younger people, for example, use visual related social media. So Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat. Middle-aged people typically use Facebook. So now you've got to think about, okay, should we target Facebook? Should we target the visual ones, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok? Should we focus both? Is there enough publics in both areas, or even in all three areas? If you look at the elderly, if there's enough interest across all three that you're shooting for all three areas of that public, then you've got to figure out what tools best get our message across in a positive way so that most people will get it and get it the way we intend. And so there's a lot of thought just in the communication side of the deal. And when you're looking at the message, you've got to look at the following. What's appropriate for that audience? That means what kind of language is appropriate, what kind of media is appropriate. Do you need to make it more visual? Do you need to make it more verbal? Do you want to make it more statistics and fact oriented? Or do you want it to be more of a feel goody kind of thing? It's got to be meaningful, of course. You've got to get your message across, and you've got to get it across in a way that the public is going to care about getting it. And you want to make it memorable. You want it to stick in their minds. You want them to remember it. A lot of times, PR is on, say, a product release or an event that's coming up down the road. Well, you want your audience to start getting excited about that. So your message has to be memorable. So 3 days later, they still have that in the back of their minds. Hey, we want to do that. It also, of course, needs to be understandable. Just like for those of you who took public speaking, which hopefully was all of you, you are looking at what is the right language to talk to your publics. And typically these kinds of things, you don't want to go for longer, bigger words. You want to go for more simple, more of an oral style actually on these kinds of things, because it's going to be more memorable. It's going to be more in the conversational way that we talk. And you want that to be there. And you also want it to be believable. You don't want your audience thinking, oh, this is just some kind of a ploy or a joke to draw interest in. It needs to be, because sometimes you're releasing stuff that seems out of this world. You know, let's say SpaceX decides to start selling tickets to Mars, you know, because that is one of their long range goals. And so the public relations department puts together a whole project around letting the public know that this is coming up. And some people are going to be like, oh, come on, they're not really selling tickets to Mars yet. That's just a joke to draw interest. You've got to make your message be believable so that audiences will want to trust what you say. Because remember, trust, credibility is everything in this business. So hopefully that's some things that will help you understand the communication side of things. It's an extremely important thing. And just like in public speaking, with audience analysis, for example, you are putting your speech together with a specific audience in mind. You're doing the same thing here. You're putting your public relations communicate together with a specific public in mind, and you want to tailor that message. And there's times you have to tailor the same message 2 or 3 different ways, depending on which public you're looking at and how they receive information and how they process it and all of that. So you have to take all of that into consideration. That's why there's a lot of planning involved. Hopefully that helps. I'll see you later.